Continuing on with great conversations with our 35th District legislators in the House of Representatives, Dan Griffey and Travis Couture. What's up, guys?
Living the
Hey, how's it
dream,
going?
Jeff.
Nice to talk with you both. Travis, we missed you last week, so let's start with you. What are some things going on these days when it comes to advocating and working for the 35th? I see you out there a lot talking about taxes and this potential income tax thing that might be coming through on millionaires and stuff like that. Where are you at on this stuff?
Yeah, so the income tax proposals just dropped last night, hot off the presses. The ink's not even dry on those yet, and they're terrible. I think that if these income taxes pass, what they are is a general income tax on everybody, 9.9%. We would all have to file. But what they've tried to do to kind of side skirt the law is create $1 million standard deduction. And it's not $1 million per individual, it's $1 million household. So basically, there's an enormous marriage penalty. And if conceivably you have two people in a household making $500,000, then that would make you subject to the tax. There's a lot of like pretty extreme penalties like felonies, more penalties than if you actually commit an actual violent crime in Washington state. If you try to evade this somehow, there's a lot of hooks. And actually, it goes after pro athletes pretty hard in the first year. So think about your Seattle Seahawks going to the Super Bowl, and then they're trying to get free agents next year. That's going to be a big decision for a free agent coming to the Seattle Seahawks, the Seattle Kraken, the Seattle Mariners, whether they're going to pay enormous amounts of jock taxes. That's what they're called, a jock tax. And there's residency hooks, so you can't really even flee the thing. So it's pretty terrible. But I think the worst part of it is that no one actually believes that this will remain on just millionaires. And where have we seen that movie before? They've changed the thresholds on capital gains and also the purposes it was passed for, also the death tax, the estate tax, right? And it wasn't just 2024 where the legislature nearly unanimously banned income taxes. So you can't really trust people who are going back on their promises less than a year and a half later. And I think that if this thing were to pass and get through a court somehow, even though it's still unconstitutional as written, that it wouldn't be too long until it was millionaires today and the rest of us tomorrow paying this tax. And we've never seen a major substantial tax get rolled back, get reduced, or get eliminated in this state. They will just pile on. And the problem in Washington is reckless spending. Don't have a revenue problem. We have a spending addiction.
Talk to me a little bit about this constitutionality. If the Democrat Party keeps trying this every year, every couple of years you guys are in session here, how does it either get through any sort of initial filing in the hopper or through the first committee or things like that? I mean, where
Yeah.
does it go? No, this isn't. Here's what the Constitution says, and here's where we see this as being.
That's a great question, and actually, I think a lot of people need to understand this. And like, so when myself and Dan write a bill, it's presumed to be constitutional up until it passes, and then up until a court says otherwise. However, if you're responsible, like me and Dan, we will do our level best to write a bill that is constitutional, as far as we can tell and as far as the nonpartisan staff can tell. But if you tell nonpartisan staff here to blatantly write an unconstitutional bill, they will. They're at the behest of what we request. And that law is considered to be constitutional until a court says otherwise. But in the case of the income tax, the Constitution doesn't say income taxes are banned, period, right? It doesn't say that in the Constitution. What we have is a 93-year precedence that says property is income, and that all property taxes must be uniform amongst the same class. That means that you can't use kind of progressive math to tax millionaires more than someone else. And the property tax is capped at a 1% growth rate in the Constitution. And so this is why just they tried to make it uniform by creating a standard 9.9 general income tax, but then tried to side skirt it with $1 million standard deduction. But it doesn't say create progressive scales are banned. It says uniform amongst the same class. And if you create a standard deduction that attacks one class of people, in this case, millionaires and above, you are blatantly unconstitutional. And the framers of our state's constitution did this on purpose, right? Because income taxes, when you look across all the other states that have them, have worse GDP, have worse economic numbers than states that do not have an income tax. And it's one of the biggest reasons we have so much innovation and tech sector and aerospace and so many other great things here in Washington State. We're the home of some of the biggest companies: T-Mobile, Expedia, Microsoft, Amazon, Boeing. You go down the list, and that is the golden goose that we have been given, and we shouldn't be screwing the golden goose right now. And the world is so mobile nowadays that these companies are not locked here, brick and mortar. They can pick up and move, and we don't want to see the capital flight, because if those big companies and those rich innovators, job creators, entrepreneurs move, that means jobs for us, and including small businesses. And I will say one more thing, Jeff, that a millionaire's tax is not just individual wealth or household wealth. It is going to attack S corps, partnerships, LLCs. And so that means point blank small business in Washington State. That's $1 million is not actually a big number anymore for a small business. And so that could absolutely harm even us in Mason County. And when you start thinking about things like the Department of Health levying a 500% increase to our shellfish licensing fees that could kill off 10% of our shellfish farms, our small guys. That's jobs and everything else. But even those businesses can be $1 million LLCs, and that sounds big, but it's not. So when you start layering things like a 500% fee increase and the largest tax increases in state history, more B&O, more sales, and now a millionaire tax that's going to attack them too, you've lost the incentive for people to work here. And that means jobs. And that's why we're projected to have literally zero job growth in 2026 in Washington State. That is a devastating number. We are going towards a financial collapse of our own making when our neighbors just to the east are doing just fine. And so it's not a national problem. It's not tariffs that causes childcare to be expensive or healthcare to be expensive or gas and groceries to be expensive. Tariffs don't affect those things at all. Those are unique Washington State problems. And we are setting ourselves up for a self-made recession. And one of the reasons I'm so frustrated about it, because I know that at the end of the day, it means pain and suffering for my constituents. And that is something that I take extremely seriously. We work way too hard. We got really great people in the 35th district, and they don't deserve what they're getting from their.
I was going to ask, you mentioned it a little bit, but with the married, combined LLCs, S corps, partnerships, do you have a sense of how many, we'll just call them entities for lack of a better term, everybody could be impacted by this? Any sort of numbers that you guys have done research on?
We're still looking at it because we just got the draft, but it'll be in the thousands, if not tens of thousands, right? It will be a lot. I mean, it does not take much to have $1 million LLC, right? And then there was promises made, and how could we expect someone to keep a promise when they just the other year said we're banning income taxes? But they promised in the bill that we're going to fund K-12 education with this. That's what they said with capital gains, but they're rating the education account that it funded, right? They're literally zeroing that account out right now for a budget deficit. And then they said that, oh, we're going to give small business tax relief. Well, there is no guarantee for that in the bill. The bill does absolutely nothing to give tax relief. It is just a straight up income tax. And then it has some flowery language about what we promise we will do. But, promises are cheap in politics, if anyone is aware. I mean, I don't think we should idolize politicians and believe their promises. And so it's just kind of crazy. I don't think that I've ever seen a B&O tax get smaller. I've never seen a sales tax get smaller. And if someone can name a time when it has, please let me know, because I went through the history of Washington. I've never seen a tax get smaller or eliminated. It just gets bigger and more and layered on.
Kind of reminds me a little bit too of some of those $502 that had been promised when cannabis had been legalized, where all that money was going to end up going. I still see reports, people going, gosh, I thought we were supposed to get a bunch of cannabis money into this different coffers, and nothing has seemed to happen. Dan, let's talk to you a little bit. Go ahead.
Well, I do have a couple of positive things I think we could talk about.
Please, let's move on.
Well,
Travis is such a downer with some of these.
Travis wasn't there last week, and I had to be the downer, so I had to do both. But I think for the first time, Jeff, we're going to monitor stalkers.
Okay.
We're going to have our CCOs, our community correction officers, monitor those people that are inflicting so much harm on survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault. I think that's great. I think we're going to start collecting legal financial obligations again, because the majority party stopped funding. They promised that once they stopped collecting legal financial obligations from those that commit crime, we were going to backfill it. Well, we only backfilled it 1 year, and now there's almost no DV services out there for those surviving those. So I think that is good. I think they're limiting the window, so what they're calling indigent. I think I would lower that income threshold a little more, but hey, we're going to collect it, and I think that's a step in the right direction. Monitoring stalkers, very much step in the right direction. I talked to you about a bill where if somebody was gratifying themselves in front of a child, filming it for their reaction, that wasn't illegal in Washington State. We're going to make that a felony in Washington State, and that is dang good news. And there's a couple ways that the majority's kind of pushing back. Their absolute hate for ICE, and I understand that ICE, the way that their tactics are deployed, frustrate people, but the way they want law enforcement in Washington State to actually stand up against ICE. I heard a speech or a presentation from the police chief in the city of Seattle, and he pointed out exactly how it couldn't work. And what he thought should happen is, even though it is, if ICE is here, even though ICE is here doing a job that maybe the elected leaders disapprove of, they're still following the law, and what law enforcement in Washington State should do is make sure that no one gets hurt. They should help them with crowd control and that sort of thing, which is completely going against what the majority party here in Washington want them to do. They want them to actually engage against them because of Washington State's sanctuary state status.
So you're saying the majority party is looking for the commissioned law enforcement in Washington to kind of stand up against the federal law.
Oh yeah, that's what they would like. So they want them to not engage at all, to turn on their squad car cameras and their body cameras and observe and collect evidence, and not help the officers. I do believe in that what the chief of police said up there is true. Our law enforcement officers need to make sure that everyone is protected and no one gets injured in any kind of engagement or demonstration. Asking them to stand down. We've done this before. We have Chaz and Chop and those sort of things. We have people, blocking all the lanes on I-5 through Seattle. I mean, the most dangerous sort of protesting activity there can be. I absolutely support one's ability to protest and demonstrate against laws and policies they disagree with, but this violent activity that we are now devolving into across the country, we can't afford for it to come here.
You mentioned to me before we started this that the Washington State Association of Police Chiefs and Sheriffs, WASPEC, if I got that right, is going to be on campus today. I'm going to talk with Sheriff Sperling Friday about this, but it looks like the Senate side of this kind of dual coin here is moving through, and this would take the vote of the people away from electing a sheriff, or I guess the removal of a sheriff if a committee were to disagree with the sheriff's practices. So
well, there were two.
There's a House one and a Senate one. Can you quickly go through that for me?
Well, there were two proposals. One we would just take away altogether our ability to elect a sheriff. That would take a constitutional amendment, so that didn't make it. The next one is the decertification of a sheriff. A board or a commission can decertify your sheriff, even if the electorate voted that sheriff in, or if the electorate reaffirmed it. The Constitution only gives one method of removing your elected sheriff, and that is a petition. We believe that the Constitution is right, and that's where it should exist.
Do you understand where or how the triggering mechanism would start for the commission to look at this? How would they get? How would they even think to go, well, let's take a look at Sheriff Sperling in Mason County and decertify him?
So about, I think 6 years ago, we worked on a bill and passed it, which is the sheriff certification bill. It doesn't require any it requires a background check on all that kind of stuff kind of before you're elected. But after you're elected, you have to complete a sheriff's certification. And they made that mandatory. What this would do is this 3-person panel would be a decision-making panel of whether they could have their certification or not. Because the Constitution says the sheriff is elected by the electorate, the way we currently elect Sheriff Sperling, because it says that and it gives a removal process, this completely circumvents the voice of you or I in who our local sheriff is. Now, a three-person appointed commissioner panel scares the heck out of WASPIC, or Washington Police and Sheriffs, because we know that Seattle and maybe some of Pierce County think a lot differently. Snohomish County, those politicians think a lot differently than maybe my constituents would, or your the neighbors do, and they might want to have a sheriff that thinks differently and that acts differently. Doesn't break the law. But on this one, it could be just a prejudice panel that was against, how we like to do things here in Mason County. And the sheriff, by our Constitution, has the right to do those things that we elect him to do.
Well, we'll keep our eye on that one, and I'll talk to Sheriff Sperling on Friday about that as well. Travis, you're not a downer, man. You're great. I love talking with you. Both guys, 35th District Representatives, Dan Griffey and Travis Couture. We'll check back in next week. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
Good to see you guys.